John, an experienced hiker, was eager for a solitary escape. He had been planning this trip for months, meticulously mapping out his route and gathering all the necessary gear. The anticipation had been building up, and now the day had finally arrived. He craved the peace of nature, the symphony of birdsong. The hustle and bustle of city life had worn him down, and he longed for the tranquility that only the forest could provide. The chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves were music to his ears. His backpack was packed, map-studded, excitement bubbling. He had everything he needed for a few days of solitude and adventure. The weight of the backpack was reassuring, a reminder of the journey ahead. This trip was exactly what he needed, a chance to disconnect from the digital world and reconnect with nature. The smile on his face was a testament to his joy and anticipation. The forest welcomed him with open arms, sunlight dappling through the leaves. The play of light and shadow created a magical atmosphere, making him feel like he had stepped into another world. John breathed deeply, the scent of pine filling his lungs. The fresh air was invigorating, a stark contrast to the polluted city air he was used to. Each breath felt like a cleansing ritual. He felt a thrill of anticipation, his boots crunching on the forest floor. Every step took him deeper into the wilderness, away from the noise and stress of everyday life. This was his haven, his escape. The forest was a sanctuary where he could find peace and solitude. The towering trees and the gentle rustle of leaves provided a comforting backdrop to his thoughts. As the sun began its descent, John set up camp. He found a perfect spot near a babbling brook, the sound of water adding to the serene ambience. Setting up the tent was a familiar routine, one that he found oddly comforting. The air grew cooler, the forest shadows lengthening. The transition from day to night was gradual, the forest slowly cloaking itself in twilight. The temperature dropped, but John welcomed the coolness. He built a crackling fire, the flames dancing in the twilight. The warmth of the fire was comforting, and the flickering flames cast a cozy glow around his campsite. It was a perfect end to a perfect day. John ate his dinner, content, listening to the night sounds begin. The forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, a symphony that lulled him into a state of relaxation. The simple meal tasted better than any gourmet dish. He settled into his tent, the zipper rasping shut. The small space felt cozy and secure, a little haven within the vast wilderness. He arranged his sleeping bag and lay down, feeling a sense of accomplishment. Outside, crickets chirped, an owl hooted. The night was alive with sounds, each one a reminder of the vibrant ecosystem around him. The forest was never truly silent, always whispering its secrets. John felt a wave of contentment wash over him. The day's journey had been fulfilling, and he felt at peace with himself and the world. The forest had a way of soothing his soul. He closed his eyes, lulled by the symphony of the woods. The gentle sounds of nature were a lullaby, easing him into a deep and restful sleep. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, but for now he was content. The next morning John awoke to an unsettling stillness. The usual morning chorus of birds was absent. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the previous night's wind, but a prickle of unease ran down his spine. As he packed up his campsite, John noticed something strange. There were footprints near his tent, too large to be animal tracks. He examined them closely, a knot of worry forming in his stomach. Who else was out here? Later, as John stopped for lunch, he discovered some of his food was missing. The bag had been carefully opened, items taken. Panic welled up inside him. This was no ordinary animal. He tried to rationalize the events, telling himself it was just a curious hiker, but deep down a chilling thought took root. He wasn't alone in the woods. Someone or something was watching him. That night, sleep evaded John. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sent his heart racing. He lay awake, staring into the darkness beyond his tent, fear a cold fist around his chest. He thought he saw a figure lurking at the edge of the trees. A flicker of movement, a pair of eyes glinting in the firelight, but when he blinked, it was gone. Had he imagined it? The following day, John decided to cut his trip short. He packed his gear quickly, a sense of urgency gripping him. He had to get out of the woods, back to civilization. As he hiked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He kept glancing over his shoulder, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The fear was a living thing now, coiling around him. John's pace quickened, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the burning in his muscles, the fear spurring him on. He had to reach his car before nightfall. He stumbled upon his makeshift fire pit from the previous night. The remaining logs had been rearranged, forming a crude symbol on the ground. Panic surged through him. This was no random act. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees. John was running now, his backpack bouncing painfully against his spine. The forest seemed to press in around him, the darkness alive with unseen eyes. He tripped over a root, falling heavily to the ground. Despair washed over him. He was lost, alone and hunted, and night was falling fast, falling. Section 5. A desperate plan. John scrambled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ankle. He had to find shelter, some place to hide until morning. His eyes darted around, searching for anything that could offer protection. He spotted a narrow crevice in the rocks, partially hidden by a curtain of vines. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He crawled inside, pulling the vines closed behind him. The darkness was absolute, the air thick with the smell of damp earth. John huddled in the cramped space, his heart pounding like a drum. He clutched his pocket-knife, his only weapon, his knuckles white with tension. He knew his pursuer wouldn't give up easily. They were out there, somewhere in the darkness, watching, waiting. John closed his eyes, trying to control his fear, knowing he needed to think clearly if he was going to survive the night. Section 6. The Hunter's Game. Time seemed to crawl by. Each rustle of leaves, each crackle of a twig sent a fresh wave of terror through John. He imagined the glint of eyes in the darkness just beyond his hiding place. Then he heard it. A soft, almost inaudible sound. Footsteps. They were close, moving slowly, deliberately. Someone was circling his hiding place like a predator stalking its prey. John held his breath, his body rigid with fear. The footsteps stopped just outside his hiding place. He could hear the rustle of clothing, the sound of someone breathing heavily. They knew he was here. Suddenly a pair of eyes, glowing an eerie yellow in the darkness, appeared just beyond the vines. John flinched back, his heart hammering in his chest. He was trapped. Section 7. Fight or Flight. The vines were pulled back, revealing a tall, shadowy figure. The faint moonlight glinted off something in the figure's hand. A weapon? John gripped his pocket-knife tighter, his knuckles turning white. He had two choices: stay hidden and hope for the best, or fight for his life. The instinct to survive, to fight, surged through him. He wouldn't go down without a fight. As the figure moved closer, John lunged. He lashed out with his knife, a primal scream escaping his throat. He connected with something solid, felt resistance, then a sharp cry of pain. John scrambled back, his heart racing. He could barely see in the darkness, but he could hear the sound of someone moving quickly, stumbling away into the woods. He had bought himself some time. Section 8. A Glimmer of Hope. Adrenaline surged through John's veins. The night was eerily silent, save for the sound of his own ragged breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle in the underbrush a potential threat. He had to get out of there. Now. The forest was a maze, and every wrong turn could mean the end. His mind raced, trying to remember the path he had taken. He crawled out of his hiding place, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ankle. The injury was slowing him down, but stopping was not an option. He had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of whatever was chasing him. He ran through the darkness, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for him to stop. Each step was a battle, each breath a struggle. But the fear driving him was stronger than the pain, but he couldn't stop. Not now, not when he was so close. He could almost feel the safety of his car, the promise of escape just within reach. He had to reach his car, had to get to safety. The thought of the car, his sanctuary, kept him going. It was his only hope. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees like looming giants in the darkness, each one a silent witness to his desperate flight. Just when he thought he could run no further, he saw it, a glimmer of light piercing through the oppressive darkness, a faint glow in the distance. Headlights. The sight filled him with a renewed sense of hope. Hope surged through him, renewed energy coursing through his limbs. He pushed himself harder, driven by the promise of safety. He ran towards the light, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and relief. The closer he got, the more real the possibility of escape became. As he stumbled out of the trees and into the clearing, he saw it was his car, his sanctuary. Relief washed over him, but he knew he wasn't safe yet. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the door open. Every second felt like an eternity, but he knew he had to stay calm. His life depended on it. Section 9. The Long Road Home. John collapsed into the driver's seat, his entire body trembling. The weight of the past few hours bore down on him, making it hard to breathe. He had been running, hiding, and fighting for what felt like an eternity. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and turned the key in the ignition. The familiar click of the lock was a small comfort, a barrier between him and the unknown terror outside. The engine roared to life, a sound he had never been so happy to hear. It was a lifeline, a promise of escape from the nightmare that had unfolded in the woods. As he drove away from the campsite, he glanced back at the dark, silent woods. The trees stood like silent sentinels guarding the secrets of the night. What had he stumbled upon out there? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Who or what had been stalking him? The shadowy figure that had haunted his every step was now a distant memory, but its presence lingered in his thoughts. He didn't know, and right now he didn't care. He had survived. The relief washed over him in waves, each one stronger than the last. That was all that mattered. The road stretched out before him, a path back to normalcy, to safety. The drive home was a blur. The adrenaline that had kept him going was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. He couldn't wait to get back to civilization, to the safety of his own home. The distant glow of city lights was a beacon, guiding him back to the familiar. The events of the past few days played over and over in his mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of the familiar. Each memory was a piece of a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. John knew he would never forget his night in the woods, the fear, the uncertainty, the sheer will to survive. It was all etched into his memory. He had faced his fears, had looked death in the eye and emerged, shaken but alive. He had survived. The experience had changed him, had made him stronger in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, and he would carry the scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of his life. They were a testament to his resilience, a reminder of the night he had faced the darkness and won.